Right, so picture this. You're an average cuber who has some blend experience due to M2OP or maybe even M2 Orozco, doesn't really matter, and you decide that you want to learn to resell. So you get around to learning it, and then you realize that this is actually kind of hard and harder than you thought, and that maybe your comps aren't sticking, and you give up. Now that person was actually me approximately 7 months ago when I first decided that I wanted to learn freestyle and actually got around to learning it. And I gave up quickly because my comps weren't sticking and it was kind of hard for me at the time. So in my opinion, that was preventable if there was some more information out there, and I feel like that information is simply nowhere to be found and you have to figure that out yourself. And this is basically what this video is basically showing you how I learned freestyle and how you can learn it, and giving you some tips along the way that I feel are missing from other tutorials. So let's actually get started now. So first I actually want to talk about Orozco and whether it's worth learning. So first, corners. In my opinion, you should only learn Orozco corners if you don't already understand how commutators work. Here's an example. UFR, LDF, UBR, sorry. So if you don't know how the process goes between the interchange and the insertion, and then undo, in my opinion, Orozco corners can be very beneficial for you. Now, if you do know Orozco corners but still don't know how commutators work, because that can happen if you learn it incorrectly, then I would highly suggest watching Timothy's video on freestyle, the part 1 specifically, and that will be linked in the description below, so check that out. Now, as for edges, in my opinion, edges aren't as worth learning as corners, and that's because some of the insertions can be very confusing and not like freestyle at all, basically. But in my opinion, you can learn edges if you think that the finger tricks are going to be very hard. So like the slice moves, specifically like the S moves, like the push ones specifically. E moves, we do a lot of those in edges. So like this with middle index. There's a lot of those shenanigans going on in freestyle edges. So if you think that you're going to have problems with that, in my opinion, you can learn Orozco edges. Or if you just want to learn them just for the sake of it, in my opinion, go for it. There's no one stopping you. And in my opinion, if you are gonna learn some sort of Orozco, but not the other, then definitely learn corners instead of edges. And in case you're wondering, I learned Orozco corners like 2 years before I learned freestyle, and I'm not actually sure if it helped me that much, but yeah, if you want, then just go for it, in my opinion. Okay, so now there is a lot of confusion about this topic, in my opinion, and that is when you should start learning freestyle. So in my opinion, first of all, I'm not going to give you a straight sub-X answer yet. In my opinion, such an answer is not fit for this question. I'm going to give you one later on, but first I want to say that you should learn freestyle whenever you feel ready for it. And that is, in my opinion, just if you are comfortable with how commutators work. So the example I showed before with, it was LDF UBR, but UBR LDF works as well. If you know that the process between the insertion and the interchange, and also like the setup moves, and are ready to put in the work, so that's like not a lot in my opinion even. It's like you can get away with 15 minutes a day, then in my opinion you are ready for freestyle, and you should definitely learn it. Now as for the sub-X answer, generally I see sub 2 being recommended a lot, and in my opinion that's a great entry point to when you should start considering learning freestyle. So like really looking into if you understand how the commutators work and seeing if you actually have that free time to learn freestyle. But of course you can learn it before that. I know that Gianfranco, I think, learned freestyle very early on, and so that's even like preferred in my opinion, because like you can start drilling comps way earlier and you're not gonna waste your time doing M2OP or M2 Orozco that much. Right, so now I'm gonna get into the goal/approach of learning freestyle. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most, if not the most important part of learning it, or when you're starting to learn it. So you might have heard the saying, or I don't know, quote, whatever, that freestyle has 800 alks, and that is not true. And I'm not talking about like inverses and mirrors, but freestyle is not 800 alks. It's instead 800 comps, give or take, depending on how many alks you're willing to learn. But generally it's like around 800 comps. Now, that might not say a lot for you right now, but what that means is that you shouldn't learn them as alks. Like, if we have a T-perm, for example, there is no intuition to this whatsoever, right? Maybe it's like a sexy move here in an R prime F, but essentially you're just memorizing the moves and then drilling them into your muscle memory so that you can just execute them off the top of your head. That is not what you're gonna do with 3-cell. Instead, what you should do is try to understand the comms, again with the logic of the insertion and interchange, and also obviously understanding the setup moves. So one example, UF, FR, LB. So here I'm gonna show you a plethora of ways to understand this comm. So in theory, this comm is simply a R setup into UF, UB, LB, and this is just U prime, R, E prime, R prime, U, R, R, E, R prime, and then R prime to finish off. However, that's not the only way to understand this comm. What you can also do is envision it as R2 into UF, BR, LB, and then from here this would cancel out obviously into RE prime, R prime. But from here what you would do is insert this into here and interchange with an E prime. And that is actually how I learned that comm, is just by envisioning it as an R2 setup into UFBR LB, and then obviously just canceling moves. And just so there's no confusion, I'm not saying this as that you should learn every comm in every way, but simply to show you that you have some freedom in learning 3-cell, and so that you don't have to understand every comm like it's written in theory. So for example, with this R example into UFURLB, but you can also understand it as R2 into UFBRLB. And this logic translates into a lot of different ideas in 3-cell that I'm also going to cover later on in the video. And just to summarize this point, this idea is basically saying that there is no right or wrong way to understand a comm. What matters is that your brain understands it and that it works in practice, which, as you're going to see, is going to happen a lot in 3-cell. If you have an idea and you think that it's going to work, 99% of the time it's going to work. Right, so let's say that you are now ready to learn 3-cell, so what should you do? So first, what I recommend is just messing around with making your own 3-cell comms. And how you do that is simply by going on CS Timer, choosing 3x3 as the scramble option, and then either edges or corners only, doesn't really matter, whichever one you'll be learning first. And generally, I see people learning edges first. I learned edges first as well. Well, not generally, like a lot of people learn edges or corners first. I think it's split like relatively 50-50. But edges are, in my opinion, easier, so do with that information what you will. But basically, you're just gonna scramble your cube, and then you're gonna try to make up your own comms. Again, they don't have to be the best, but they just have to work, and you have to like get at least a little bit of an intuition about setup moves. So one example I saw Jeremy use as well for this comm. This is UFLURD. So for this, what you might do is L F prime L prime S2, which as you can see is not the fastest. And the idea behind this is simply that you're gaining intuition on setup moves, and eventually you are going to learn the better setup moves, which would be R prime FR into SR2, and then canceling some moves at the end. But for now, you just basically want to gain some intuition on setup moves. Right, so now how do we actually learn the proper setup moves for 3-cell? First, for that, obviously we have to choose the comms, and generally Elliot's Sheets is recommended for this. I'm gonna link it down as well in the description, and that's if you're lazy. But what you can also do is make your own sheet. That's what I did, using BlindDB or BlindBase. Actually, no, sorry, don't use BlindBase, just use BlindDB, and that's with the man-made option. However, I will have to warn you that if you're gonna go down this road, then you are most likely gonna change a lot of comms in the future that you're gonna realize are either bad that you choose, or there is simply a better option for them. And with Elliott Sheets, you're most likely gonna do that as well at some point, just like refining some comms just for your own taste and preference. But with your own sheet, you're most likely gonna do that a lot more than with Elliot's sheet. So just choose whichever one you want, really. And now for the actual approach on how to learn 3-cell. So I would recommend that you learn set by set or letter by letter. And essentially what that means is, for example, your buffer is UF, and let's say that you're learning UB or A first. So that would mean that you would learn every comp for UB, so UBUR, UBUL, and so on throughout the entire cube. And once again, when you do that, you want to try to understand the comps and the setup moves behind them. Now, you can do that by learning the comps either directly from the sheet or with Anki. And if you don't already know what Anki is, it's essentially just a flashcard program that will automatically schedule your cards when you should learn them again. And I feel like that's pretty handy, and I don't have to like overlearn or underlearn stuff and then forget stuff later. And what you'll want to do is, after learning either one set or a couple of sets, then you should drill your comps by, again, doing edge only or corner only solves on CS Timer, whichever one you're learning right now. And if you come across a case that you haven't learned yet, then you can either just come up with an intuitive solution or the Orozco for it, but preferably the first option. And you can also use stuff like Blind Trainer, which I'm also going to link down below, to drill comps. I've personally never used it, but you can do it if you want to. Now, once again, this process can take as little as 15 minutes a day, which is not a lot. It's like, what, maybe 5 to 10 minutes for learning a set, and then like again 5 to 10 minutes for drilling it. Of course, you can increase the time in which you drill the comps, or even learn more sets, which will then obviously increase the time that it takes per day. So now I'm gonna quickly cover rules, and what I mean by that is essentially you can make some rules for yourself to not forget / better understand the logic behind setup moves or comps. And I feel like these really help me with 3-cell, and again, like not forgetting some setup moves or comps. So one example I'm gonna give is UFBLLU. So this comp is U prime L setup into this /com. And I essentially made my own logic with like rules to not forget the setup moves to some /coms. And this rule is to always like really quickly figure out the last 2 U moves, so the ones that undo the setup moves. And for this, I gathered 2 pieces of information. So first of all, if the 2 U moves at the beginning are the same, so in this case it's U prime, Y del U prime, so in this case they are the same. If it would be U prime, Y del U, then they would be not same. And second piece of information is the second U move. So in this case, it's U prime, Y del U prime, so the second U move is U prime. Again, if it would be U prime, Y del U, then the second move would be a U. And with these 2 pieces of information, I can figure out the last 2 U moves very quickly. So first of all, the first U move that I undo is always the same as the second U move. So in this case, the U prime that we memorized. And if the first 2 U moves are the same, then the last 2 ones will be different. So in this case, the opposite of U prime is U. So I know that the last U move is a U. And for this case, in this case, the first 2 U moves were different, and the second U move was a U. And if we do the M prime U to M, this U move will be a U, and since they are the same, the second is also a U. Now, you may have found this confusing, and I do not blame you, but this was just an example of what a rule could be. But obviously, you should make your own rules to understand your commutators. And 99% of the time, again, they will work, because in 3-cell, somehow everything seems to work. And I obviously have a lot more rules than that. Like, I also have one for some of these 4 movers, specifically the S and E ones. I'm not going to be covering them here because, again, you should be making your own rules. But yeah, that's essentially the rules. Now, what you should do after you learn 3-cell or edges or corners, again, doesn't matter. First of all, you should spam solves, like blind solves, and obviously like also sided solves, so like edge and corner only sided solves, to get comfortable with 3-cell. So basically to the point where you're so comfortable that you won't forget any comps. And that generally won't take very long. It took me around 2 or 3 days to do that. And then at this point, getting faster with 3-style will be very easy up to a certain point. It's basically just comes down to having better ThinkPad, which again is very easy in the beginning. Improving your memo speed, so just starting to one look and having faster tracing speed, and improving finger tricks, which you can do by drilling comms and seeing which finger tricks are the best for certain comms, and eventually they will just come naturally to you. And there's really not much else to it. And obviously later on you can also learn stuff like full floating or LTCT. But for now, in my opinion, you should just spam solves and improve memo and finger tricks until you're about sub 30 or sub 25 even. And then I would start either learning full floating or LTCT, but in my opinion, full floating comes first, because after that point, improving will be very hard. Yeah, so that's basically it for this video. If you have any more questions, then just type them out in the comments and I'll do my best to respond. And other than that, I'll see you in the next video.